December 1944. Winter came early that year. Not gently, not quietly. It arrived like a weapon. Across the forests of the Ardennes, snow fell without pause. Roads disappeared. Trees bent under the weight of ice. Entire landscapes froze into silence. For soldiers on both sides, the cold was not an inconvenience. It was an enemy. American troops stood guard through endless nights, boots stiff with ice, hands numb inside frozen gloves. Breath crystallized in the air. Weapons jammed. Engines failed. Sleep came in short, dangerous moments. This was not supposed to be a battlefield. The Ardennes was considered too rugged, too dense, too unforgiving for a major offensive. Allied planners believed winter itself would protect this sector. They were wrong. Before dawn, German artillery shattered the silence. The earth shook. Trees exploded into splinters. Snow turned black with smoke. Hitler had launched his final gamble, a massive counteroffensive designed to split the Allied lines, capture vital supply routes, and force a negotiated peace. It would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. At the center of this storm stood a small Belgian town, Bastogne. Bastogne was not large, but it was vital. 7 major roads converged there. Whoever controlled Bastogne controlled movement through the Ardennes. Inside the town were the men of the 101st Airborne Division. Paratroopers rushed into battle without proper winter clothing, without heavy armor, without time to prepare. They were surrounded almost immediately. German forces closed in from every direction, tightening the ring with every passing hour. Snow continued to fall, and Bastogne became more than a town. It became a test. By the middle of December, Bastogne was completely cut off. Every road leading in or out of the town was under enemy control. German infantry, tanks, and artillery formed a tightening ring around the frozen streets. Inside Bastogne, the situation worsened by the hour. Food supplies dwindled rapidly. Soldiers survived on cold rations, sometimes sharing a single meal between several men. Ammunition was counted carefully. Every bullet mattered. Medical supplies were nearly exhausted. Morphine ran low. Bandages were reused. Wounded men lay in dark cellars, listening to the war above them. The cold was relentless. Temperatures dropped far below freezing. Snow seeped into foxholes. Boots froze solid overnight. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes as silently as any enemy bullet. German artillery hammered the town day and night. Shells tore through buildings already weakened by earlier fighting. Houses collapsed inward. Churches lost their steeples. Streets became fields of rubble and ice. Civilians hid wherever they could, trapped between armies, hoping the walls around them would hold. Then came the message. German commanders, confident in their advantage, sent a formal demand for surrender. They believed the Americans were beaten, isolated, exhausted, and out of options. The response from the American commander was brief. Nuts. It was not just an insult. It was a statement. The 101st Airborne would not surrender. Despite hunger, despite cold, despite overwhelming odds, the paratroopers held their positions. Every approach to the town was defended. Every German probe was met with stubborn resistance. Men who had not slept in days stayed alert through sheer will. They learned to fight quietly, efficiently, ruthlessly. But even courage has limits. Inside Bastogne, the men knew the truth. Without relief, the town could not hold forever. And far beyond the frozen perimeter, the fate of Bastogne rested on a decision yet to be made. Hundreds of miles from Bastogne, the war looked very different. Inside Allied headquarters, the cold of the Ardennes was replaced by the quiet tension of a command room filled with maps, reports, and flickering lamps. Officers spoke in measured voices. Every word mattered. At the center of the room stood General Dwight D. Eisenhower. As Supreme Allied Commander, Eisenhower carried the weight of the entire Western Front on his shoulders. Every decision he made affected hundreds of thousands of lives. Before him lay the problem of Bastogne. On the maps, it appeared as a small point, surrounded by red arrows pressing inward. But Eisenhower understood what those arrows represented. If Bastogne fell, German forces could surge westward, splitting the Allied lines and delaying the end of the war. Time was critical. Eisenhower listened as his commanders explained the situation. Weather conditions were brutal. Roads were clogged with snow and ice. Units were scattered and exhausted. Moving an army under these conditions was dangerous. Turning one was almost unthinkable. Then Eisenhower asked a simple question. Who can move now? The room fell silent. Most commanders knew the risks. They hesitated. The weather alone could destroy an advance before it began. Then one voice broke the silence. General George S. Patton. Patton did not hesitate. 48 hours, he said. Not a request, not a hope, a statement. Some officers exchanged glances. Others shook their heads. To many, the idea seemed reckless. An army could not simply turn north in winter. Not this fast. Eisenhower studied Patton carefully. He saw not bravado, but preparation. Patton had anticipated this moment. He had trained his army to move quickly, to adapt, to strike when others hesitated. Eisenhower made his choice. George, he said, you go. With that decision, everything changed. Orders were written. Radios crackled to life. Units that had been moving east were ordered to turn north immediately. The risk was enormous. If Patton failed, the responsibility would be Eisenhower's. But leadership, Eisenhower believed, meant choosing action when waiting meant disaster. And now, an entire army was on the move. The order went out immediately. Columns of American armor began to turn north, away from their original objectives. Maps were redrawn. Routes were reassigned. Engines were started in the bitter cold. For General George S. Patton, there would be no delays. He demanded speed. Tanks and trucks pushed forward along narrow, frozen roads. Snowstorms reduced visibility to almost nothing. Drivers followed the faint tracks of the vehicle ahead, praying they would not slide into ditches or mines. Engines struggled in the cold. Fuel lines froze. Men worked through the night, repairing vehicles with numb fingers and frozen tools. Patton pushed them harder. The enemy, he reminded his commanders, is just as cold as we are. German resistance came quickly. Roadblocks appeared at key intersections. Villages became battlegrounds as American infantry fought house to house. Artillery thundered across snow-covered fields, turning white landscapes into chaos of smoke and fire. Every mile forward was earned. Inside Bastogne, the men of the 101st Airborne heard distant gunfire echo through the frozen air. Some dared to hope it meant relief. Others had learned not to hope too soon. Days blurred together. Then, on December 26th, the sound changed. The gunfire was closer, louder, different. American tanks broke through the German lines south of Bastogne. Their silhouettes emerged through smoke and snow, unmistakable against the white horizon. The siege was over. Men climbed out of foxholes they had not left for days. Exhausted soldiers leaned against tanks, too tired to speak. Some laughed, some cried. Most simply stood in silence. Patton had kept his promise, but the battle was not yet over. The cost would still be counted. When the news reached Allied headquarters, the room fell silent. General Dwight D. Eisenhower read the report carefully. Bastogne had been relieved. The line held. For a brief moment, the weight he carried seemed lighter. Later, Eisenhower would describe the operation as one of the most remarkable maneuvers of the war. Turning an entire army in winter, under pressure, and striking with precision, it was a feat few believed possible. But Eisenhower never celebrated lightly. He understood the cost. Across the snow-covered fields and ruined streets of Bastogne, the price of victory lay frozen in the ground. Men who had held the line would never leave it. The Battle of the Bulge marked the failure of Germany's final offensive in the West. From that moment on, the initiative belonged to the Allies. The war would move forward. Bastogne became more than a strategic victory. It became a symbol of preparation over panic, of leadership under pressure, of soldiers who refused to surrender when logic said they should. Patton once remarked that the enemy had not surrounded the 101st Airborne. The 101st had surrounded the enemy. History remembers Bastogne, not for its size, but for its stand. In the coldest winter of the war, courage held the line, and one decision, made in a quiet war room, changed the course of history.